The night was cold and silent in a small hospital in Texas. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and the hallways smelled of medicine and loneliness. In one of the rooms, a newborn baby girl lay inside a tiny crib, wrapped in a white blanket. She was only a few hours old, but she was already alone. No one stood beside her. No one came to hold her hand or whisper her name. A nurse looked at the baby and sighed deeply. She was left here, the nurse whispered to another. Her mother disappeared after giving birth. No name, no papers, nothing. The baby didn't cry much. She only moved her tiny hands, as if searching for someone who was supposed to be there. The only thing beside her was a small teddy bear with a pink ribbon, soft, but old. The nurse placed a small card on the crib. It read, "Baby girl, no name." Days passed. No one came for her. And so, the hospital sent her to an orphanage. The orphanage was a simple building at the end of a quiet road. The walls were painted blue, but time had made them fade. Inside, children laughed, played, and sometimes cried. Among them grew the same baby girl, now a little child named Emily Parker. Emily was different. She didn't talk much, and she often sat alone near the window, hugging her teddy bear. The other kids sometimes called her Quiet Emily. "Why don't you play with us?" one of the girls asked once. Emily just smiled and said softly, "I'm waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For my mom. She's coming back. I know she will." But years passed, and no one came. When Emily turned 7, she was told the truth. The head caretaker, Miss Susan, sat beside her one evening. The sun was setting, and the room was warm with orange light. "Emily," Miss Susan said gently, "I think it's time you knew. Your mother, she left you here when you were born." Emily's small hands froze around her teddy bear. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry out loud. She just nodded. "Did she not want me?" Emily asked in a tiny voice. Miss Susan hesitated. "Sometimes grown-ups make hard choices. But it doesn't mean you weren't loved." Emily looked out the window at the sky turning dark. "Then why didn't she come back?" she whispered. Miss Susan didn't have an answer. Emily grew older, but the question stayed in her heart. By the time she was a teenager, she had learned to smile even when she was hurting. She helped younger children tie their shoes, shared her food, and told them bedtime stories. Deep down, she didn't want them to feel what she felt, forgotten. One day, a family came to the orphanage looking to adopt. They smiled, asked questions, and looked at all the children. When they passed Emily, the woman smiled kindly. "She's beautiful," the woman said. "How old are you, sweetheart?" "I'm 12, Emily replied, standing straight. But after a moment, the couple moved on. They adopted a younger child instead. That night, Emily went to her bed and cried silently into her pillow. "Why does no one choose me?" she whispered. Her teddy bear lay beside her, the same one from the hospital, still holding its pink ribbon. Years later, Emily turned 18. It was time to leave the orphanage. Miss Susan hugged her tightly and said, "You're brave, Emily. The world isn't easy, but I know you'll make it." Emily smiled. "Thank you for everything." She packed her few belongings, 2 shirts, a small notebook, and her teddy bear. As she walked out of the gate, she looked back once. The place that raised her looked smaller now. "I'll come back one day," she whispered. "Not as that lonely girl, but as someone who makes a difference." Time moved on. Emily worked at a small bakery during the day and studied at night. She was quiet but kind, always helping others. People liked her gentle nature, even though they didn't know her past. But no matter how busy she was, she never forgot the feeling of being left behind. Every time she saw a child alone on the street, her heart ached. One rainy afternoon, Emily visited the same hospital where she had been born. It had changed, new walls, new faces, but something about it still felt the same. She stood near the nursery room and watched new mothers holding their babies close. Laughter and love filled the room. Emily smiled, but tears rolled down her cheeks. "I wish I knew who held me," she whispered to herself. A nurse nearby asked kindly, "Are you visiting someone?" Emily shook her head. "No. I was born here." The nurse smiled. "That's special. Do you still have your family here?" Emily looked down. "No. They left long ago." Before leaving, she walked past the records office, a small door with a glass window. Something inside caught her eye. On a shelf sat an old box labeled 1997 Abandoned Infants. Her hands trembled. That was her birth year. She asked the receptionist, "Can I look at that box?" The woman replied, "I'm sorry, those records are sealed." Emily nodded and walked away, but her mind was racing. She knew there were answers somewhere, and she was ready to find them. As she stepped outside, the rain started again. She opened her umbrella, but the wind blew hard, and a piece of paper from her bag flew away. She ran after it and saw that it had landed near the hospital gate right beside an envelope someone had dropped. She picked it up. Her name was written on it, to Emily Parker. Her heart stopped. She looked around, but no one was there. The envelope was old, yellowed with time. She opened it slowly with shaking hands. Inside was a single line, written in faded ink. "I know who left you that night." Emily's heart pounded. Who wrote this? How did they know her? She looked around once more, but the street was empty. Only the rain answered her. She pressed the letter close to her chest. For the first time in years, she felt something new, not just pain, but hope. She whispered to herself, "Maybe the story isn't over yet." And with that, she walked away into the rain, unaware that this letter was about to change her life forever. Emily stood in the middle of the empty street, her heart racing. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, but her mind was storming. She looked again at the envelope in her hand, her name, written in careful handwriting that looked old, maybe decades old. She rushed back to her small apartment and placed the letter on her kitchen table. Her hands shook as she opened it fully. Inside was a short note. "Emily Parker. I know who left you that night. If you want answers, come to 214 Oakwood Street Sunday 5 p.m. Martha Collins." Emily read the message again and again. The name Martha Collins didn't mean anything to her. But the promise inside those few words, "I know who left you that night," hit her deep. She looked around her quiet apartment. The rain still whispered outside. On her shelf sat her teddy bear, the one she had since birth. She picked it up, pressed it close to her heart, and whispered, "Maybe this is it. Maybe I'll finally know who I am." The next few days were slow and heavy. Emily could barely focus at work. Every time she tried to bake bread or pack orders, her mind went back to that letter. Her co-worker, Lisa, noticed something was wrong. "You look distracted, Em," Lisa said. "Everything okay?" Emily smiled faintly. "I got a letter, from someone who says they know about my past." Lisa raised her eyebrows. "Are you serious? That could be dangerous." "I know," Emily said softly, "but I need to know the truth." Lisa looked at her with concern. "Just promise me you'll be careful, okay?" Emily nodded. "I promise." Finally, Sunday came. The sun was setting when Emily drove toward Oakwood Street, a quiet area on the edge of town. The road was narrow, lined with old houses and large oak trees. The wind made the leaves dance across her windshield. She parked her car in front of an old white house with broken shutters and faded paint. It looked abandoned, but the porch light was on. Emily took a deep breath and stepped out. Her heart pounded harder with every step toward the door. She knocked gently. No answer. She waited, then knocked again. Still nothing. She tried turning the handle. The door creaked open slowly. Hello, she called out. Is anyone here? Martha. The air inside smelled of dust and old paper. The house was silent except for the faint ticking of a clock somewhere. Emily walked inside carefully. The living room had old furniture covered with sheets. The floor creaked under her feet. Then she saw something on a small wooden table, a photograph in a silver frame. She picked it up. It was a picture of a young woman holding a baby wrapped in a white blanket, and next to the baby was a small teddy bear with a pink ribbon. Emily's breath caught. That's my teddy bear, she whispered. She looked closer. The woman in the photo had gentle eyes and brown hair tied in a bun. She looked scared but full of love. Emily sat down slowly, her hands trembling. Is this her? She whispered. Is this my mother? Just then, she heard a sound. The floor creaked behind her. She turned quickly. Hello? Who's there? But no one answered. Her heart raced as she moved toward the sound. The hallway led to a back room. She pushed the door open, but the room was empty, except for old boxes and papers scattered on the floor. She found another envelope on the table, this time with her name again. She opened it, but it only said, I'm sorry I missed you. You came too late. I'll try to reach you again. Martha. Emily sat down on the dusty chair, feeling confused. Who was this woman? How did she know about the teddy bear? About that night? She looked around again and noticed a small piece of paper sticking out from under the photo frame. She pulled it out carefully. It was a part of an old hospital record, a birth log, and it had a familiar name written faintly in pencil. Mother, M. Collins, age 16. Emily froze. Her mind couldn't believe what her eyes were seeing. M. Collins, she whispered. Could that be Martha? Was this woman her mother? Or someone who knew her? Her heart pounded harder. She suddenly felt dizzy, as if the air itself was spinning around her. She sat there for a few moments, gripping the teddy bear she carried in her bag. When she finally stepped outside, the sky had turned dark. The street lights flickered, and the air smelled like rain again. Emily stood under a tree, staring at the empty house. She felt both closer and further from the truth than ever before. I found something, she said softly to herself, but I still don't understand. As she walked toward her car, she noticed something near the porch steps, a small notebook half covered in leaves. She picked it up and brushed off the dirt. On the first page, written in neat handwriting, were the words, For my daughter, in case I can't tell her the truth myself. Emily's heart jumped. She opened the notebook quickly, but the first few pages were blank. The ink had faded with time. She turned to the last page, and there she saw a date. September 2, 1997, the night I had to let her go. Emily pressed the notebook against her chest and closed her eyes. Tears rolled down her cheeks. For years she had dreamed of finding her mother. Now, she had a name, a photo, and a promise of truth, but no answers yet. She whispered, I'll find you, Martha. I'll find out what happened that night. As Emily drove home, the streets were quiet. The wind blew through the open window, and her thoughts filled the silence. Maybe her mother hadn't abandoned her out of cruelty. Maybe something else had happened, something she didn't know. She looked at the teddy bear on the passenger seat and smiled faintly. I think you always knew the way, she said softly. The moonlight reflected on the notebook beside her, its faded cover glowing under the light. Emily didn't know it yet, but the next clue and the truth about her past was waiting for her in a place she least expected. The story of the girl nobody wanted had only just begun. Emily didn't sleep much that night. She sat by her window, holding the old notebook she had found at the house. The soft glow of the moon fell across her face. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the picture, the young woman holding a baby with the same teddy bear she still kept. Was that her mother? Was Martha Collins really the one who left her that night? And why did she write, "In case I can't tell her the truth myself"? So many questions filled her heart, but there were no answers yet. She looked at the notebook again. The pages were old and fragile, but one sentence stood out to her. Sometimes love means letting go even when it breaks your heart. Emily wiped her tears. For the first time, she felt something she had never felt before: understanding. Maybe her mother didn't hate her. Maybe she loved her so much that she had no choice. Weeks passed, and Emily tried to go back to her normal life. But nothing felt the same. Her thoughts were always about that night, that baby, that letter. One Saturday morning, she decided to visit the foster care center in town. She had passed by it many times before but never stepped inside. The building was simple, painted in white and blue, with drawings of smiling children on the walls. Inside, the sound of laughter mixed with crying and chaos. A woman in her 40s, wearing a name badge that said Mrs. Daniels, social worker, came up to her. "Hi, can I help you?" she asked kindly. Emily nodded nervously. I I was in an orphanage when I was little. I know what it feels like to be unwanted. I want to help somehow." Mrs. Daniels looked at her curiously. "Help how?" "I don't know," Emily said softly. "Maybe volunteer? Or, maybe even foster a child one day." Mrs. Daniels smiled. "That's a big step, Emily. Many people come here wanting to help, but few stay long enough. The children here have been through a lot. They need patience and love." Emily nodded. "I can do that. I know what it feels like to wait for someone who never comes." A few weeks later, Emily started volunteering at the center. She helped serve food, read stories, and played games with the children. There was one boy, around 6 years old, who never smiled. His name was Liam. He had big brown eyes and a small scar on his cheek. He didn't talk much and always sat alone, building the same puzzle again and again. One day, Emily sat beside him. "Hey," she said softly. "That's a nice puzzle. What are you building?" Liam didn't look up. "A house. Looks like a good one," Emily said with a gentle smile. "Who's going to live in it?" He shrugged. "No one. Nobody wants me." Her heart cracked open. The words hit her like lightning. She reached out and touched his hand gently. "That's not true, Liam. I want to be your friend." He finally looked at her. "Really?" Emily smiled. "Really?" From that day, Liam followed her everywhere. He started to smile again, laugh a little, and even help other kids. But there was something about him that reminded Emily too much of herself: the loneliness in his eyes, the quiet pain he hid behind small smiles. One evening, after all the kids had gone to bed, Mrs. Daniels found Emily still sitting in the playroom, holding Liam's puzzle pieces in her hands. "You've bonded with him," Mrs. Daniels said softly. Emily nodded. "He reminds me of myself. He's just a little boy who wants to belong somewhere." Mrs. Daniels sighed. "He's had a hard life. His mother left him at the hospital when he was a baby. He has a weak heart. Most families don't want to take the risk." Emily looked up suddenly. "Then I will." Mrs. Daniels frowned. "Emily, are you sure? Being a foster parent isn't easy." Emily smiled through her tears. "I know. But I also know what it feels like to be left behind. I promised myself no child should ever feel that way again." The process wasn't easy. Emily had to fill out papers, go through interviews, and prepare her small apartment for a child. She painted the walls light blue, bought new sheets, and filled the shelves with storybooks. When the day finally came, She stood at the door of the foster center as Liam ran toward her with a small backpack. He looked up at her shyly. "You're really taking me home?" Emily knelt and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. You have a home now." Liam hugged her tightly, and in that moment, she felt something break inside her, something that had been locked away for years. She realized she wasn't the abandoned girl anymore. She was someone's safe place now. Life wasn't perfect after that. Liam had health issues, sleepless nights, and fears that sometimes made him cry. But Emily never gave up. When he was scared, she held his hand and said, "You're not alone. I'm right here." When he asked why she chose him, she smiled and said, "Because you chose me too." Each day, her small apartment became warmer, not because of sunlight or furniture, but because of love. And every night before bed, she looked at the old teddy bear on her shelf and whispered, "I kept my promise." Months passed. Emily began fostering more children, those no one else would take. Kids with scars, fears, and broken hearts. Her house filled with laughter, noise, and love. She didn't have much money, but she had what mattered most: a heart that never stopped caring. Yet deep down, she still thought about Martha Collins, the woman who might be her mother. The woman who started it all. One evening, as she was tucking Liam into bed, he asked, "Mom, do you have a mom too?" Emily froze for a moment, then smiled softly. "Maybe. I'm still trying to find her." Liam yawned and whispered, "If you find her, tell her thank you for giving you to us." Tears filled Emily's eyes. She kissed his forehead gently and whispered, "I will." That night, as Emily looked out the window at the moon, she made another silent promise. To keep loving the ones the world forgot. And to keep searching for the truth about her own beginning. Because maybe, just maybe, the answers she was looking for were already living in her home. The sun was setting behind the hills when Emily got home from work. Liam was coloring at the table, humming softly, and the smell of macaroni and cheese filled the air. It was a peaceful evening, warm, gentle, safe. But on the counter sat an envelope. It had no stamp, no name, just her address written neatly in blue ink. Emily frowned. She picked it up, her heart tightening. The handwriting looked familiar. Inside was a short note. "Dear Emily, I am in the Willow Creek nursing home. I have something to tell you about your mother. Please come before it's too late. M. Collins." Emily's hands began to shake. Martha Collins. The same name. The same person she had been searching for. She looked at Liam, who was smiling at his drawing. "Mommy, look, it's you and me," he said, showing her a picture of them holding hands. She smiled, but her heart was far away. "That's beautiful, honey," she whispered. "Mommy just has to go somewhere tomorrow, okay?" The next morning, she drove to the Willow Creek nursing home, a quiet place at the edge of town surrounded by tall pine trees. The building looked peaceful, almost like it was hiding old secrets inside its walls. A nurse led her to a small room where an elderly woman lay on a bed near the window. The woman's hair was white, her skin pale, but her eyes, gentle and full of sadness, seemed familiar. When the woman saw Emily, she smiled weakly. "You came," she said in a soft, trembling voice. "Are you Martha Collins?" Emily asked carefully. The woman nodded slowly. "Yes, dear. Please, sit." Emily sat on the edge of the bed, holding the notebook she had found months ago. "I found this in your house," she said. "You wrote it?" Martha looked at it and nodded again. "I wrote that for you," she whispered. "I hoped one day you'd find it." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why did you leave me? Why didn't you come back?" Martha took a deep breath, her frail hands trembling as she reached for Emily's. "Oh, Emily," she said softly, "I never stopped thinking about you. Not one single day. She paused for a moment, her eyes looking far away as if remembering another life. I was 16 when I had you, Martha began. I was scared, alone, and your father, he didn't want us. My parents said a baby would ruin everything. They took me to that hospital and said I had to sign a paper. They said they'd find you a better home. Emily's eyes widened. You didn't want to leave me. Martha's voice cracked. No, my dear. I begged them to let me hold you once more. They allowed me just a minute. You were so small, so perfect. I gave you that teddy bear, it was all I had. And then, they took you away. Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks. She held her mother's trembling hand tightly. I thought you didn't want me, Emily whispered. Martha shook her head. I wanted you more than anything. But I had no power back then. When I turned 18, I went back to the hospital, but you were already gone. No one would tell me where. Emily pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold back her sobs. For years she had carried pain and anger in her heart, and now it melted into pure sorrow. I'm sorry, Martha said weakly. I know I can't change what happened. But I prayed that someday you'd know the truth. Emily leaned forward and hugged her gently. You don't have to be sorry. You loved me, that's all I ever wanted to know. The two sat in silence for a long while. The sound of birds came through the open window. Martha smiled faintly. You grew up to be such a kind woman. I saw you once, years ago. You were volunteering at the orphanage. You looked happy. I couldn't bring myself to speak to you. I was afraid you'd hate me. Emily shook her head. I could never hate you. Because of what you did, because of your pain, I learned how to love others who were left behind. I foster children now, Mom. I take care of the ones no one wants. Martha's eyes filled with tears. You became everything I prayed you'd be. Emily reached into her bag and pulled out the teddy bear. Do you remember this? She asked softly. Martha gasped, covering her mouth. You still have it? Emily smiled through her tears. It's all I ever had of you. Martha reached out and touched it, her fingers trembling. I sewed that ribbon myself. I wanted you to have something soft to hold. Emily placed the teddy bear beside her mother's pillow. It's home again, she whispered. That night, Emily stayed by her mother's side, listening to her stories about her youth, her dreams, her regrets. Before she left, Martha held her hand tightly and said, Promise me something. Anything, Emily replied. Keep giving love. Even when it hurts. That's what makes you my daughter. Emily nodded, tears falling freely now. I promise. A week later, Emily got a call from the nursing home. Martha had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Emily sat quietly in her living room, holding the teddy bear. The house was silent, but her heart was full. For the first time, she didn't feel abandoned anymore. She felt found. She whispered, Goodbye, Mom. Thank you for loving me, even from far away. Outside, the wind blew softly, and a single photo on her shelf, the one of her mother holding her as a baby, fluttered slightly, as if touched by invisible hands. That evening, Emily tucked Liam and the other kids into bed. Can you tell us a story, Mom? Liam asked sleepily. Emily smiled. Sure. Once, there was a little girl who thought she was alone in the world. But one day, she found out that love never really leaves us, it just waits until we're ready to see it. The children drifted off to sleep as she whispered softly. And that little girl grew up to be someone's home. The next morning, Emily placed a small photo frame on her dresser, a picture of Martha smiling. Beside it, she wrote a note. For my mother, who taught me that love can survive anything. Then she looked toward her living room full of toys, laughter, and life and smiled. The truth had finally set her free. Morning sunlight spilled through the curtains of Emily's small house, filling the room with a golden glow. The sound of laughter echoed from the kitchen, the kind of laughter that once felt impossible in her life. Liam was chasing the twins around the table, giggling loudly. Another little girl, Mia, sat by the window drawing flowers, her wheelchair surrounded by crayons and papers. On the wall hung family photos, smiles, birthdays, messy dinners, and memories that felt like magic. Emily stood near the stove, watching them with soft eyes. Her heart was full, not of pain anymore, but of peace. It had been a year since her mother, Martha, had passed away. A whole year since Emily discovered the truth that changed everything. The sadness of losing her was still there, but it had turned into something gentle, something that reminded her of love, not loss. Every morning, before starting her day, Emily looked at the photo of her mother on the shelf. She would smile and whisper, "I'm keeping my promise, Mom." That afternoon, Emily was preparing lunch when she heard a knock on the door. It was Mrs. Daniels, the social worker who had helped her adopt Liam. "Emily," she greeted with a big smile. "Your house looks even happier every time I visit." Emily laughed softly. "It's a little loud sometimes, but I wouldn't trade it for the world." Mrs. Daniels stepped inside, glancing around at the children playing. "I came with some news," she said. "We just got a new case, a baby girl. She was abandoned at the hospital this morning. No name, no papers, just a blanket and a bracelet with a pink charm." Emily froze for a moment. Her heart started beating faster. The story sounded too familiar, too close to her own. Mrs. Daniels sighed. "She's in the nursery now. No one has come for her. We're trying to find a foster home, but it might take time." Emily's eyes softened. "Can I meet her?" Mrs. Daniels smiled. "I thought you'd ask that." That evening, Emily walked through the hospital halls, the same place where her own story began. Everything looked brighter now, not as cold or lonely as she remembered. She stepped into the nursery and saw a nurse holding a tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket. The nurse turned and smiled. "You must be Emily Parker. Mrs. Daniels said you'd come." Emily nodded gently. Her hands trembled slightly as the nurse placed the baby in her arms. The baby was small and beautiful, sleeping peacefully. On her wrist was a bracelet with a pink heart charm. Emily felt a tear slide down her cheek. "Hey there, little one," she whispered. "You're safe now." The baby moved slightly, as if recognizing her voice. In that moment, Emily felt something deep inside her, a sense of connection, like the universe had brought her back to the very place her life began. She looked around the room and smiled through her tears. "I was you once," she whispered softly. "But I promise, you'll never feel alone like I did." When Emily brought the baby home, the children gathered around, excited and curious. "Is she staying with us?" Liam asked, his eyes wide. "For now," Emily said, smiling. "Until she finds her forever home." Liam frowned. "Can't this be her forever home? Like mine?" Emily looked at him lovingly. "Maybe it will be." Over the next few days, the baby, whom Emily named Grace, became part of their little world. Mia sang to her, Liam made her laugh, and Emily spent long nights watching her sleep, remembering her own beginning. Sometimes she would hold Grace close and whisper, "You're not unwanted. You're chosen. You're loved." Months passed. Emily's house grew even busier, louder, happier. She continued to foster and adopt children who had no one. Her story began to spread. Neighbors, social workers, and even local news started calling her the mother of hope. One day, a reporter visited her for an interview. They sat on the porch as the children played in the yard. The reporter asked, "Emily, what made you start all this? You've changed so many lives." Emily smiled softly. "I was abandoned when I was born. For a long time, I thought I wasn't wanted. But then I learned the truth that sometimes, people let go not because they don't love you, but because they have to. That truth set me free. She looked out at the children playing and continued, now I just want to make sure no child ever feels what I felt, that emptiness, that loneliness. Every child deserves to be loved. The reporter nodded, visibly moved. You've created something beautiful here. Emily smiled. Love can start in the saddest places. You just have to be brave enough to give it again. Later that night, after everyone was asleep, Emily sat by the window holding her old teddy bear, the one her mother had given her. The ribbon was worn, the fabric soft from years of holding it close. She looked up at the sky and whispered, Mom, I kept my promise. I gave them the love we both wished for. The moonlight filled the room, and for a moment, she could almost feel her mother's presence, gentle, warm, proud. Years passed. Emily's children grew older, went to school, and built their own dreams. But her home always stayed open to those who needed it. On the wall above the fireplace hung a large frame filled with pictures every child she had ever cared for, smiling and happy. In the center was a single photograph, a newborn baby wrapped in white, beside a small teddy bear with a pink ribbon. Underneath the photo were 5 simple words. Love never leaves, it grows. One quiet evening, Emily sat on her porch as the sun set behind the trees. The wind carried laughter from inside the house, and she closed her eyes, feeling at peace. From being the girl nobody wanted, to becoming the woman everyone needed. Her story had come full circle. And somewhere, she believed, her mother was smiling too.